This is a viewer requested prop. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name's Ryan, or RGR Productions, and today I'll be showing you how I made my Captain Gregor helmet. So this Commando helmet that I'm making in this episode isn't like a lot of my other helmets. As you can see, it has some serious channels in the side of the dome, and the dome isn't exactly a perfect dome shape. It's more flattened off at the back half. This one also doesn't have a fin, and the visor is a unique shape, so I'll just have to modify my regular Phase 2 template just to get a decent enough shape. I'm going to start with the dome, and then I'm going to work from there, and I'm going to do this main top part first, then I'll add in these side details, then I'll do the faceplate and these sides. So, I'll start from there. Right here, I have my regular Phase 2 Clone Trooper helmet template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace out the shape of these, modify these little side areas just a little bit. This needs to be more of a consistent curve, kind of like that. Just fill in this area right here. And then the visor just needs to be a different shape, so probably something like this off of the sides. So I'm just going to transfer this on some paper and then make a new template. I just stuck some of that scratch paper that I used onto my table with some tape, just so it wouldn't move around, and I also taped down my template as well. Then I traced out half of it because I can fold the piece of paper in half, and then I started going over it with the new look that the Commando helmet would have. It's pretty similar to this template, so I just drew out the new visor shape and trimmed that cheek area a little bit, and then I got my shape. Then I traced it out onto some cardboard and I cut it out, and I made sure to do consistent cuts so that there were no jagged edges. Then I just cut out the whole piece and the visor. So this is the main faceplate piece. So now I'm just going to set this aside and I'm going to start working on the dome. As with all of my other helmets, this dome is starting out as a 26-inch strip of cardboard that I'm just rolling into a tube and then gluing with a crossbar at the top. And on this one, I wanted the dome to have a more round shape, so at the bottom I just glued it together with some temporary braces that I would remove later, and then I just did the vertical one and then the horizontal one, and that just made up the dome. And then I started filling in all of the edges because I needed to have the dome done and those channels on the sides done before I could glue on the faceplate. So I just went and did all of the dome, and this is pretty time consuming, so just make sure to take your time because the more time you spend on this, the better the outcome will be. Once I had a full half of the dome done, I got pretty excited and I thought that I could trace out one of the channel sides, so that's what I did. I just traced out the channel where it's steeper at the back, but then it's less steep at the front, and I also traced out where the earpiece would go, so that's just a semicircle on part of it. Then I just filled in the other half, just making sure to take my time and to curl the pieces nicely so that they wouldn't be too straight. These pieces of the dome just consist of a main piece that connects to the front-facing bar and the side-facing bar, and then the two pieces that just fill in the gaps that are on the sides. Then I just filled in the other half, and I also traced out this side's channel as well. So I cut out the first sides, and I also just glued in the other pieces on the last side of the dome. Then once I had that done, I could cut out the other side as well. And then I just cut some pieces that would be filler in between the dome and then the gap. So this would create a gap in between. So I just glued it on underneath the dome, and then I glued those offcuts back on so they would make a nice shape. And then I just did the same on the other side, so a piece of cardboard with the channel glued on top of it. So now I have finished this dome, including these two side panel lines. So now I'm going to take the visor piece, and I'm going to glue it in underneath this main dome, just like this. And then after I have that glued in, I'm going to work on the side ear pieces that come down. after I had that faceplate piece glued on, I glued on that little bar that goes on top of it, but it's still underneath the dome. And then once I had that glued on, I just cut out some shapes that would work for both of the sides. So now that I've got this whole dome done, I trimmed it down about a half an inch just because it looked a little tall. And I have this piece done on the front, and the visor in, as well as these two ear pieces. The only thing left on the ear pieces are these two circular details, which will take about a minute to do. But for these side scoops on my other helmets, like for example, Arc Trooper Havoc, you can see how these side scoops just go in straight at a 90-degree angle. Well, that is not to say with this Commando helmet. With the Commando helmet, it is different, because these pieces are at an angle kind of like this. So that will have to be changed, and I'll have to make this one piece that curves from there all the way to there, and it'll have about a 45-degree angle. So I'm just going to add those pieces. This just took a little bit of experimenting with holding up a piece of cardboard and then tracing out a round shape and cutting it out and just guessing and checking, seeing if it fit. Then if it fit, I just doubled it on the other side to where I was happy with it. Then I just glued on the sides, but I made sure to make a slope at the bottom because they taper in from the top to the bottom. And then I started adding in the pieces that angle out to where you'd grab onto the helmet if you were to pick it up. So these pieces just lie right under those side scoop pieces that I just created. So I made one for both sides, and then I glued them on, and then I just added about a 3/4 inch piece to the bottom of that just angled down. And then I started filling in the very front of the helmet. So this was just a couple pieces of cardboard that I just angled inwards, and then once I was happy with that shape, I just trimmed it and then glued it on, and I did the same for both sides, and then I added a filler piece in the middle, and then I just rounded out the edges around that. So for my helmet, I made the front chin piece have two layers. So there was one layer that would be the base of the jaw and the mouth line, and then there was another piece that just detailed out where the mouth line would be so that you could see it and I could paint over it later on. Then I just added that raised section in the middle, and then I carried that 3/4 inch strip all the way around to the very front, and then I added a piece in the very middle, and just make sure that there's going to be a detail here. I just ended up leaving that out, and I just added it in at the very end. Then I just added those two circular details on the sides, and I took some time and cut them out with my X-Acto knife until I was happy with it. Then I just traced out a couple circles for both ears in the middle on both sides, and these are going to be gray in the finished product. And then I added some little 1/4 inch pieces to the bottoms of the ears, and there are 4 of them on each side. Then once I was happy with this, I started adding this one detail piece at the back. It's a pretty funky shape, so I just made sure to look at a reference image, and my main reference source was Google. But when I was playing Star Wars Battlefront, I noticed that the back of mine looked different from the one in the game. So if you're going to do that, just make sure to find a good reference image that you can use throughout your piece. I took some pieces of cardboard and I put them on the bottom and just made a little bit of a chin line underneath that so you could see it if you angled the helmet slightly up. Then I started filling in the back. So I took a piece of cardboard and I angled it slightly so it would have a nice curve and it was like a rounded triangle. And I glued that from the back of the earpiece all the way around to the almost middle, basically where that channel at the bottom of the piece at the top of the dome ended, if that makes sense. Then I just left a little gap in between this and the piece that goes below it, and the piece that goes below it goes all the way from the back and the bottom of the earpiece, and then this one also wraps around and ends where the piece on top of it ended. Then I just added a strip of cardboard that filled in that gap and gave it a nice smooth contour that would be easier to spackle over. Then I just repeated the same thing on the other side, and I started working on the detail at the back. So it's just 2 1/2-inch strips of cardboard that run all the way up the piece, and then there's just 4 detail boxes, and then the remaining of the space is just another box at the bottom. So I just took a piece of cardboard that was less than 1/4 inch thick, and I just covered the edge with a thin piece of cardboard so you couldn't see the corrugation, and I just glued 4 of these pieces on, and then I just glued on a small piece of cardboard at the very bottom. Now that I am done filling in this whole helmet, including the backside with all these nice details on it, I am ready to go outside and start spackling. So I am going to spackle over all of these gaps in the dome, so like these ones, all over there, and a few on the sides like here, and then these gaps on the back. Then once I have that done, I can sand the whole helmet and then prime it with some filler primer. This spackling process is the same spackling process that I did ever since my Mark 85 Iron Man helmet tutorial. I just used some water to smoothen out the gaps. That's the only difference between that one. So I have several videos out. All of my recent Star Wars props, about half a dozen of them, and the Iron Man Mark 85 armor. Now that I have this helmet all nice and spackled, you can see that there are some high spots on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand down those high spots on the dome and all the way around where I've placed the spackle, and then I'm going to re-spackle it over all the parts I spackled just to cover up any of the exposed cardboard that might come out. So I'm going to sand it with some 220 grit sandpaper and then hit it with another layer of spackle. When I sand my helmets, I like to use some 220 grit in a circular pattern. It just removes most of the high spots, but also it doesn't leave any deep channels that you might get from rubbing in the same direction repeatedly. And also I like to use a semi-high grit because a 70 grit would just remove too much material and it gives them more control. So I just sanded it down, and then I just re-spackled over all of the seams again, just to give it a nice smooth texture. This is the first time in about 6 helmets that I've done a second layer, but I really like the outcome, and if you think you need it, then do it, because it'll probably benefit. Then I just primed the whole helmet. Now that I am back inside from priming, and I'm happy with the overall finish of the dome and all of the other parts that I sanded, I am going to mask off all the areas that I want to keep gray. So this whole strip inlet on the back, that is going to remain gray, as well as these caps on the ears. Those are also going to remain gray. I'm going to mask those off, then paint the front with this yellow paint that I got, and then I'll mask that off and then paint everything else white. So I'll get masking. So now I've finished masking the whole back detail line there and these 2 side detail pieces with the edges as well, so they all remain gray and the edges won't be white. So now that these will remain gray, I'll go outside and paint this whole faceplate area and this top bar with some of my yellow spray paint. Then once that is done, I'll wait for it to dry and then mask off the detail. It looks something like this, and then it goes back and connects to there. And then this is painted yellow as well. So I'll go paint that. So now I'm outside and I'm just going to paint the faceplate with some golden sunset spray paint. Now that the paint is all nice and cured, I'm going to go back inside and mask out all of the details on this helmet. So this whole top bar is going to remain this yellow color, and these side area from about here to there and then down on both sides, that is going to remain yellow. So once I have that masked, I'm going to paint the whole thing white, and then I'll work on the tally marks on the helmet. And that is the masking job finished for this helmet. So as you can see, I cut out this little channel on both sides, right there, just because that's how it is on the actual helmet. And then you can see how it just slopes all the way to the middle, and then there's just this little bit that goes down to there. So this is all that is going to be yellow. So now I'm going to paint everything else with some gloss white. Then, once I get back inside, I can remove all of the tape. The only thing different with painting your final color versus priming is you don't want to have any drips, so I just made sure to avoid those. Now that I've removed all of the masking tape after the paint was fully cured, I am now ready to do this little visor piece down here, the extension for the mouth. So I painted this big piece of cardboard with some gloss black just to put in that gap and to put in the details down here. So I'll put those in. Now that I have this mouth part of the visor all filled in, with it going down to the sides, and I have these little details done at the front, I'm going to do all of the tally marks on Gregor's helmet. So that just means a bunch of tally marks with a Sharpie. So I'll do that. Now I have all of the tally marks on Gregor's helmet. So the next step for me is to weather the whole thing. So that is just some watered down black paint over the whole thing, and I wipe it off. I'm not going to go into depth on that in this video, because I have a video out on weathering already on my channel. So if you want to know how to weather, just go check that out. So, I'll do that. But before I weather, I'm going to put in the visor, and this visor is different from my other helmets because it has lights in it. So I'm going to use this blue folder that I have that's see-through, and I'm going to put this in the top half of the visor because this bottom half is actually black, so I'll just keep that in mind. Now that I have this lens all in there, and I have some LEDs to light up the inside, so if I go ahead and turn all of these on, that is what the lens looks like. So, if I dim the lights, then it looks really cool. I'll show you what that looks like. This is what the helmet looks like when it's all nice and lit up, and I think it looks really cool. So, the next step for finishing up this helmet is to weather it. So, that's what I'll do next. Now that I have this helmet all nice and weathered everywhere, it's looking really nice, and I'm really happy with how it's done. So, this is the finished helmet. So that is how I made my Captain Gregor helmet. So now, I'll cut to the outro. This project was really fun to make, and I highly recommend that you make it too. I really enjoyed making this helmet because I got to experiment with lighting up a visor, which I haven't done before. If you have any suggestions on what I should make next, please leave them in the comments down below. This has been RJR Productions, signing off. Till next time.